Okay, so now that the editing is toggled, we'll close this. Um, One thing we'll do is also change the colors. So I'm going to go back into properties because when we put the map side by side, if we have the same colors for the legend, then in the legend it would get confusing which one applies to which one. So we'll change that. So click on the drop down. I'm going to go into the all color ramps. And let's say we just choose oranges, I guess, for this one. Apply, click OK. The reason you're not seeing any difference is because this layer isn't checked off. If I check it off, now you can see it. And we'll leave the other one blue. I'm just going to go back into properties and reclassify this because as you see in this one, in reds, this was like white, but in here, this one's actually like a light blue. And so I don't want this to have a separate class for just 0 to 1. So I'm going to reclassify this and we'll make it natural breaks and that's fine. And we'll click apply. And again, you can't see that one either because now this one, the orange one is on top, but if you were to uncheck it, you can see what that looks like. One thing just that well, actually I'll point it out when we look at both at the same time because you'll see what I mean. We could have filtered out just DC in this map if we wanted to. For now, we'll leave everything because I also want to just point out some other things, especially in terms of the relationship between the two. But for now, we'll leave this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click on Project, and we're going to click New Print Layout. Okay, and you could enter a unique title. I'm just going to say Maps Side by Side. You can call it anything. Doesn't matter. Okay. So to add your map to this, the thing that you can do is click on this icon. It's the 6th one, I guess, from the bottom. So we're going to click on that one, and then we will draw it, and I'll just draw it halfway. Okay, and it'll say rendering map here, and it'll have map 1 written here. If you click on item properties, you can see some other things that you might be able to change about that, etc. Your map usually updates to show, it will show whatever is here. So for example, now if I go back here, unclick the %black, now only median income is selected. And that window is still there. It's just going to be hidden behind. So if I go back to it, and now if I click on the map thing again, and let's say now I draw a second map here, and I'll say rendering map, and that will show you what has just been rendered. Okay. So now you have these two maps side by side. You can more easily now compare the two of them. Because of the fact that we have more than just DC in this area, it's a little bit kind of hard to see like the different boundaries. One thing you might want to do to be able to do that is change the colors of the boundaries. Sometimes what I like doing, I don't know what it will actually do in this case, but we can try it out, is that we can get rid of the borders. So we can just see kind of the relationships between places and not necessarily the lines. So if you click on the symbol, the thing next to where it says symbol, if we click on that, we'll see this. And then what we can do is if we click on this option that says simple fill, then we can change, and instead of just, yeah, we'll still leave the simple fill, but what we can do is here for stroke color, we can click on the drop down, then we can just click transparent stroke, so it'll just get rid of, it'll make it a transparent border, and if we click OK and we click apply, so now what that'll do is it'll get rid of the lines in between them. Okay, and I'll do the same thing for this one. It's not always useful. We'll see. We'll kind of have to see how that works. What you can also actually do is just make the stroke width 0, which probably, which is sometimes better. Let's see. In this case, if it's better or not. Well, it doesn't seem to have worked in this blue layer. Simple fill. Or yeah, so the reason it's sort of being a little bit fidgety is the old version worked a little differently, but let's try this. The stroke style will make it no pen, which means no stroke, and apply that. Yeah, that works. As you can see, it's kind of nice, but then also kind of a little bit disorienting. So it really depends what you're trying to do. And what the context is. In this case, actually, what would be probably the most helpful would just to have like a little border around DC, so you can kind of focus on that area, and then maybe borders around the main areas that you're focusing on, while still leaving some of the other things. But just because right now we don't have that option, we will learn how to do that, but for now we will change that. So one thing is that now that these have been updated, we want them to update. And to update, we want to refresh the map. And that was the blue one. And then I'll go back here and then check off the orange one. And then click on this one and click on the refresh button. And then that'll refresh. Again, it's still not a perfect solution, but it is still somewhat helpful. We can make this smaller if we want to, or bigger as we need. Okay, so let's say you have this, and you can see that when I did that, now both of them are refreshed to the orange one. So we can make sure we go back and check off only the blue layer. Click here and then click refresh. So it's just showing you the blue layer. If you want to make sure that it doesn't update at all, you can click on the lock option. So lock layers, go here, click lock layers, so that nothing gets updated. And then now what we can do is add in other elements. So now we can add in, this option adds in a legend. And you just have to click here and just click OK. And it'll add in a legend. You can see sometimes this still does happen even if you've locked it. So we'll leave it for now and we'll adjust it in the end so that we don't keep running into that problem. Okay, and then you see you have more information than you need here, right? Because we just need the % black and then the medium income. We don't need that little the line that shows us the CSV layer. So we're in the item properties for our legend. We're going to scroll down and we are going to scroll down, and here first we'll uncheck auto update. Then we'll click on that option that we want to get rid of and just click on the minus sign, and then that'll get rid of it. This is good, except we don't want it in one column. We might want it in 2 columns. So you can scroll down, and then for columns you can change it, and you can say 2. You can do different things like equal column widths, so it's kind of spaced apart, and things like that. You can also, if you wanted, add 2 legend elements and then keep them separate, so that way you can move them around separately instead of in this case, which they're moving together, which is probably actually a good idea. So I am going to do that. So I'm just gonna copy this and paste it, and then one of them I will click on % black and remove that, so that we just have median income, and then the other one I'll click on median income and remove that, so that we just have % black, so then we have 2 of them that we can easily both move around. Let's go back. Yeah, so we'll do the updating in the end, just because of the way we don't want to run into this problem again later. Let's fit that in, and you can see if I on my mouse, this is just zooming in as well if I use my 2 fingers. So you can also zoom in that way, by the way. Okay, and what it'll do is it'll zoom in on the page, not zoom in on the map. If you want to zoom in on the map, you have to use a different tool. You can also change the scale value, which is just a reference to what what the scale is, and you want to make sure that both are the same. Right now they're slightly different just because you might be accidentally zoomed in slightly differently when you were doing one versus the other. You want to make sure that both are scaled to the same amount, so that way they're both exactly the same. Great. We might want to make this a little bit smaller so that we can fit the legend. This is not the best use of the space, but I just want to right now show you one way you might accomplish this. Okay, we want to add in a scale bar, so that's this icon, and you can just click and it will add it in for you. And if you drag it out, I don't know why it's getting added in so big, so we'll make that smaller, and then we will move that around. Let's put it in the corner. You can change the style of it by, instead of having it click single box, I like a minimal style, so I might do something like line ticks up. For units, if you were working in Europe, you might use You might use different units, but for here, we'll just stick to miles. We'll have our labels for our miles. And then here you'll see you have 2 miles, but you normally, sometimes, I think in the old version, maybe this works, and maybe in the new one this doesn't work, where if you drag, it would get bigger. But if that doesn't work, then what you could do is here where it says how many segments, you can change this to say like 5 segments, for example, so that it would show 5 miles. Okay. And this goes by 1, and that's because if I click on here and I see it says its multiplier is 1, if I were to make the multiplier 2, it would go by 2s, and that's why when I say 5, it goes to 2.5. Okay, sorry, actually, this is not the thing that we want to change. But if we change this to say 2, that will then go from, it will have 5 labels, but it'll go from 0 to 10, and it'll multiply by 2 each time. So depending on what you want, how you want to label it, you can change this. Okay, so we'll leave that for now. Let's just move it a little bit over so the mouse doesn't get cut off. Then you want to add your north arrow, and let's just add it up right here. And okay, what happened to our north arrow? Okay, so with your north arrow, you'll go into search directories, and then choose one of the ones that they already have for you. So they have some really nice options. I'll click on this one, and then for fill color, I will make the fill color black, so that it's black instead of being white. Why isn't it showing? Where is our north arrow? Let's try adding it again. Let's see, maybe if I draw the square. Okay, yeah, so just draw a square instead of just clicking on it. And again, you can change the type in the search directory and the color. I'm just going to do that here and make this black. Okay. You might want to make it a little smaller so it doesn't take up so much attention, because you know the north arrow is really not the focus of your map. Okay, so now you have these 2 things that you need, and you'll need to add text for a title. And let's say maybe you add your title here, since you have this extra space at the bottom. Here you can write out the title, so you can say race and class in the let's say DC. I'll say DC area, even though I don't know what people refer to as DC and the area outside of that. I think it is DC area, but anyways, we'll just leave that for now. But obviously, if you're doing this research, you will have figured out what might be. You would have done research besides just mapping a location, you know. Okay, so let's say we make this a little bit bigger. We justify it left, etc., etc. You can change the font size, etc. You can make it. You can rotate it. There's a lot of things that you can do with it, but let's say we just leave, you know, this is it for now. I think, yeah, if you press enter at the specific text here, it just enters it in the same way here. Okay, and then you probably add some more text. I'll click cancel. So I just clicked, that's why it gives you that. But let's say you might want to include a source. So let's say this is where you might include your source information, and you might say source, and this is coming from Social Explorer census data. So you might say that 2018. Like, this is not the way you would actually cite, but I'm just giving you a little brief example of how you might do that. And then you might also include some text to say your name. So I'm going to put mine, or map by, and then the year. Sorry, it's actually 2020. Okay. these two things might actually be, this is not moving easily, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know why that's happening. But you might move it actually differently. You want to make the best use of the space. And these are not just aesthetic choices. They also affect how easily someone can read your maps. You want to make sure you take some time to play around with these things. Okay, and then now let's just update our map. So I'm going to go back here, click on black, go here, and click refresh. Okay, come on, refresh our map. Oh, well, now it's not refreshing because the layers are locked. I don't know why I did that. I guess I might have accidentally done that before I had clicked the lock the first time around. And so then you would have your map, and then someone would be able to make the comparisons. As you can see, actually, that not having the borders doesn't actually really help. It also creates a little bit disorienting element. So you might want to add those back. To add a border also to your to the map element itself, you can go down here, and then you can add a frame to it, and then it will have a little border, which could help with making it a little bit less disorienting. And you can do that to this as well. Okay. And now if you wanted to save this, you would just click on the layout option, and you would click export as PDF. Okay, and you might call this something else, race class DC. Let's just put it in the same folder we've been working with. Click save. So you have these options whether you want to export as vectors. You don't need to worry about it unless you know Illustrator, which then you would be able to do some other choices. But otherwise, just keep it the default. Let's see. Okay, I should be able to. Oh, there it is. So it'll tell you. You can find it, and then I can open up my PDF, and I'll be able to see my maps. And now you have it. You started from the very beginning, and you've created it all the way to the very end, and you have a PDF. Okay. So some of the things that I wanted to point out, I'm going to re-add in the border, so we can actually now think about what this is showing us instead of just figuring out how we create this. Okay, so I'm going to make it a little bit light, just because I think it will then not draw too much attention. That is not good. Oh, that's because I have to go back to here. Then because we had checked the transparent, it's keeping it transparent. So let's first make it all the way dark and then choose a light color. And then if I click OK, that should work. And you'll see now that's added back. When you have dark colors, another color that could work well is like white. I'm not going to do that because then in the lighter areas it's not going to show up well. But that's just another like aesthetic thing to keep in mind. Okay, and we'll add it back to this as well. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so there we go. We have both of our things. And let's go back here, unlock, and refresh. Okay, and then go back to this one, uncheck this one, and click on this and refresh. And then that's it. Okay, so now looking at these, now we can kind of see where those exact lines are. That's why I kind of added these back in. We can see that there is pretty kind of like strong relationship with median income and race, but that there are still some distinctions that we can see, right? So here there's a very small Black population, and the median income is very high in this area. And over here, we see a large Black population, especially in the DC, in the area that's actually in DC, we see that this is a very small median income. But once we start getting outside of DC, and we're in the larger just Virginia area, we can see that these median incomes don't necessarily correspond as strongly. We can see that here these areas, and some of these which actually do have large Black populations do also have a larger median income. So this is kind of where you're seeing this is where you would see the Black middle class. And so you want to make sure that you're talking about all of these elements. It's not always as cut and dry the way we, it's a very simple, the way people think about race and class is often simple, and we want to make sure that we're not falling into these traps. There are lots of nuances to these structural groups and topics. And I'm sure you're learning about it in this class, so you'll also have insight into that, and then you can use these maps to strengthen your arguments. I talked a little bit about this, but I want to go back to it to point out the fact that each map that you make is an argument no matter what. Sometimes people say, oh, but you're trying to, it's like, it's propaganda, or you're distorting something to show just what you wanted to show. Well, the thing is, the truth be told, right? Like I said before, every projection can distort something, and in the same way, as you can see with the maps, when we were making them, like let's say for example, when we were choosing between equal interval and natural breaks and quantile, if we change those settings, this map would look very different, right? If I use equal intervals, we might not necessarily see such a stark contrast because a lot of the colors would be represented differently, or we could make it so that it would be a starker difference, and then we might think, oh, there's even bigger disparities than there already are, and so all of these are choices that the person who's creating these maps make, and we want to make ethical choices, so we're obviously we don't want to mislead people by making extreme changes to our maps, but that doesn't mean that we aren't making an argument in here, right? When we do this, we are trying to say something about this. If I was making this map, I would probably provide a bit more detail so that, what I was saying before about how we notice some trends in DC, but that there's also other things that we notice. I would write about those things so that way it's kind of clear when someone were to see this, or if this was in a report, then obviously I would include it in the report. So that all of the context and what I want someone to take away from this is there, because otherwise someone might look at this and they might take away something else, right? And so that's important to focus on. In the next workshop, probably what I will show is how to, let's say, just limit it to the DC area. If you wanted to do that for a map like this, so that you're just focused on that one area. And then also look at schools and the relationship between, like, adding a points layer to this and how you would do that and how you would work with a data set that's not already a shapefile and how you create a shapefile from it. So now that I think about it, actually, let me show you just how to do DC in this one itself, because since in the other one we'll be looking at schools also in Maryland, that will just have that be the focus of that one. So if I go back to what we can do actually is, let me just let's save this. You can save this as a template if you want to. We won't save this as a template. We'll just save the first just make sure the project is saved. And that's saving your QGIS file. Again, I will go back to the same folder that we've been working with and call this, I'll call this DC. Now you can call it whatever you want it to, whatever makes sense to you. And we can, we'll leave this print composer open for now and we'll go here. So to limit to the DC area, remember I showed you all first how to do the select features by, and so we're going to do that. We're going to select it by, I believe it was 11, right? So we're going to select our features. And you won't notice anything getting yellow because it's selecting for the layer I had clicked on. And so if I uncheck %block, for example, you'll see it. And now what I'll do, I will right click on this and I'll click export and I'll click save features as. So what this is going to do is actually create a new shapefile for you. And we're going to change our format so that it says as reshape file. It'll ask us for a file name. So I'm going to first go into our Metropolitics folder. And actually in here, I'm going to create a new folder just because I like to make sure things are separated and organized nicely, because otherwise it can get really out of hand really quickly. So DC census tracts shapefile, create, and I'll call this DC. And notice when I'm saving it, I'm not adding any spaces. I'm using underscores instead. That's because in GIS it doesn't like spaces, so you just want to be careful about that. So now I'm going to click save. Layer name is if you wanted to add this layer back in, you would give it a name. Everything else will save. The only thing we'll change is we'll click on save only selected features. So in our new shapefile that we're going to create, we only want these census tracts, not the rest of them. Okay, and we'll click add the file to map so that it adds it to here. Click OK, and now you can see a shapefile that's just this. The representation has changed. It goes back to being single. The single symbol that we saw, but we can re-represent this in a second. And we don't need to do the same thing with the %black, because once we have this, if we look at it and if we open the attribute table, it saves it with all the data that was already in it. So we have all of that here to be able to utilize. Although it looks like for some reason it cut off one of our, it doesn't have p_black. Oh, I know why it doesn't have p_black, because we created p_black here, although it should have saved here, but I think that's why we don't see it. So let's do this export actually again with this %black. So you didn't need to do it the first time around. So I'm gonna remove this layer actually. So if we click on this and if we click on the minus sign, it'll remove the legend. Okay. So now we'll do it from this one. And again, to point out the reason we're doing this, because in this one is the one in the attribute table where we created the %black column. Okay. So select features by value, click 11, select, close, and right click, export, save, and we're gonna go back here, click on the same thing, click save. It might give you an error if you try to do that. Sometimes if you try to write, it gives you an error, but let's see. Okay, yeah, so we could just say overwrite it. Okay, great. Now it's overwritten it, and if we open the attribute table for this, we should see %black. Oh, yeah, right here. Maybe the other one did have it, actually. Maybe I just didn't realize it because it wasn't at the end as I had expected it to be. Yeah, so maybe that's what happened. Anyways, now let's uncheck these other two. And let me first make a copy of this one. And well, actually, instead of copying and pasting, let's just duplicate. So we have those two layers. And in this one, we'll go to Properties. And we will, instead of single symbol, go to graduated and choose %_black. And just to stick with our the things we were doing before, I'll click oranges, natural blades, classify. I'm not going to play around with this stuff too much right now because this is just really to show you how this works. And we already went through all this process of creating the representation. We already know all of those things. Let's change the value here. What was supposed to be this last one? And you can see these get cut off. So when you create a shapefile, they can only have lengths of a certain name. And so some of them will actually end up having sometimes the same ones. In this case, it accounted for it well. And they don't, but sometimes that can happen. So you want to be super careful about that. Which is why you might want to, like, let's say, rejoin the shapefile. Rejoin the CSV to the shapefile. Okay. And what color have we done? Did we do blues, right? So natural breaks, classify, and these numbers now might be different because now this is with the new data set because it's only accounting for the values in this area, not outside of that area. Okay, and if I go back to my window here, the print composer. One is so we've updated this. Obviously now this is very zoomed out. And if we want to zoom in, no, this is the, oops, I always forget what zooming in is. This one is the one that zooms in the page. So So I think this one is the one that zooms in on your map. Yeah. Nope. Okay. This is the thing that always is difficult. If I click on this fourth icon, it allows me to move this around. And if I use my fingers, like if I use the way you would scroll on a computer with 2 fingers, you can do that, or you can change the scale here. So if you notice, if the scale gets, if the value gets bigger, it gets smaller because it's the relative comparison between things. And if the scale gets smaller, the map gets bigger. So we'll just use something like this. If I go back here now and uncheck this one, and I click on the second map. Why is it not letting me click on the second map? Okay, let's see what's happening. Also, my laptop is about to die, so let me just plug it in first. So it doesn't die on us. Okay, let's go back to this. Let's go back here. Okay, that's refreshed. And now, if it's not letting me click on this, I think, not really sure why, but if I click on here in my items, I can see it, and I can see the other map option. And then I'm gonna uncheck the lock, go here, go back here, check off the blue map, and let this refresh. And then before I lock it, actually, I want to make sure that I also zoom in to this one. I can make sure it has the same value by copying those values. Right now, I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm just going to get it somewhere close, just for the sake of time. But now you can see that now both of these only show the DC area, and it's not as disorienting. So actually, if I wanted to get rid of the frame, I could also do that. And if I go back to this one, oh, this one I haven't locked, which is why it is locked. Sometimes it does this thing where the locking doesn't work. If you lock this, this way it might work better. Let's see. So let's just first update this. Go back here, refresh, and let's try locking it, and maybe it won't. And if we go back to this one, go back to map 1, uncheck the frame. And so now then you can get rid of the frame because you don't need it as much anymore because you're not having all of that map area. You actually have a delineated border, so you don't need it. And that also gives you more space to play around with these things, to move them around. As you change the scale, this legend will also change. So you can play around with these things as well. I don't know why this is... Oh, I know why it's not letting me click, because I had clicked on this icon to move the map around, but then it doesn't let you click on things, so you have to go back to that third icon, so then you can actually click and move around on things. So your scale, because we've zoomed in, will have changed, so if you want to fix that again, you'll have to click on your scale, and then change these things, so you can adjust it accordingly. Other things to keep in mind is actually these legends are now actually not perfectly accurate because the numbers will have changed for your DC. So if you are using it with these new DC maps, then you'll want to click Update All, and then make sure you keep only the one that you want to. So let's say in this one, I would only want to keep the this blue layer. So first, let me just click on the arrow so I can easily see everything. And I will press Shift so I can select all of these, remove them, and then I'll click on the census 28 and remove that one. And now I have only this one. Obviously, we want to change the name because this one I didn't name it correctly, which is why it says census tracts copy. And obviously, we don't want it to say that. So I can, if I double click on it, it lets me rename it, and I can rename this to median income, and that changes the label here. Great, and let's go back to this one. Let's fix this one. Okay, and I will, select all of these, and it's not letting me uncheck because first, once I do the update all, I need to uncheck that auto update button. Okay, and this one I will also want to rename because I didn't rename it accordingly. So %black, great. Yeah, and now you have your two legends again. And again, as I said, now you have a lot more space, so you might want to rearrange things. You can use the space a lot better. You don't necessarily, you have a lot more space that you can work with, so why not use it? One thing I want to point out is if you want cleaner numbers here, what you can do here is go into your legend, and then, once you already have the natural breaks, you can still clean it up a little, right? So this 53, if I click on the layer itself, if I double click, it'll open this. Excuse me, you might change this to, for example, 54, or sorry, 55, and maybe make this 90, and maybe make this one 120, make this 165, so that you have some cleaner numbers to work with. And so all you have to do is if you click on values, you can change your upper value. So let's make this 55,000, and if you click OK, it'll change your legend automatically, right? So now you have this ability to do this. I'm not going to do it for all of them, just show you. And click OK. And if I go back here, these numbers the legend will update automatically. Okay. You can see that as you drag, you'll see these lines, so you can make sure things are aligned. All these things are important. Keep them in mind. But generally, this is how you do it, and this is the process. And now you've created two maps, and now people can look at this and see the relationship between race and class in DC, and it's pretty stark. Okay. So you can export this as a PDF again, etc. You can export it as an image. One thing that's important that you want to keep in mind, so I'm going to close this. Now that I've saved this, I'm also going to close this. Okay. Close everything else. And now let's say I'm going to open up my downloads folder where we were working in. Where is, oops. Oh, I think it's not in, yeah, there it is, okay. And now let's say I have moved, I have all my files on a USB, for example, and then I, maybe I accidentally move them around, right? So this US census tract shapefile, maybe, now maybe it's on my desktop. Let's just move it away. Right, and then now if I open up my QGIS file, so it's the one that's .qgz, if you saved it, it might say this. Anyways, I'm gonna find QGIS and open it with it. Okay, come on, don't do this. Okay, let me just open up QGIS again and open it from there. Okay, project, open, and go to the folder that we were just in, and click on the QGZ file. Okay, and now you'll see it'll show you the layers, and it'll say, oh, these are not available. It says unavailable. So because the reason it does is because the way QGIS works is it doesn't actually save all these things inside the project. All it does is it saves references to where they are, so it knows that where it's coming from. So as soon as you move it, it doesn't know where it is, so you won't see a representation anymore. So a lot of times people think, oh, I lost everything that I did. It's not that you lost everything that you did. All you have to do is just retell it where these things are, right? So what I would do is I would click on here, click browse, and then just go to wherever I have saved it. So, in my case, I saved it here. And you want to click on the .shp extension, not the rest of them. Remember, even though all of these make up the shapefile together, the .shp is the one that you'll refer to. And click open. And you'll do it's the same thing for this one. .shp open. And then if you click apply changes, and then you will have them back. And now if I were to look at the other ones, you would see that they still exist. If you don't do that, you'll only have the ones that it still knows where it is. So it would only have these, and if you were to click on these, those wouldn't show up. So that's why you want to be careful, because sometimes people think they've lost all their work, but it's not that you've lost all your work. It's just that it needs to know where you're saving these things. Okay. And that's it. So just make sure you save your project again and continue from there.